Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of Pit Pass Network interviews. This time we got Shawn Magee. He's a graphic designer who designs NASCAR paint schemes and trophies throughout the top three series of NASCAR. So welcome, Shawn. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, it's a great honor. So I guess to start off, tell me your background and how you got into graphic design for NASCAR.
Yeah, so it started out. I have a 4-year bachelor's degree in graphic design from a Penn State affiliate, Pennsylvania College of Technology. Obtained many years ago. Been in the industry for quite a while, and kind of got tied up with NASCAR. After we moved back north, we lived in the Carolinas for about 8 years, and during that time, I kind of laid the groundwork to try to, get into the sport more and just try to make connections. And that finally happened once I moved up to Ohio. Ironically enough, I got teamed up with a small truck team that reached out and wanted me to help them with getting their brand out there and designing the trucks for the team and just any sort of advertising needs they had. So that really was the catapult that got me into the sport. From there, I just made connections, got teamed up with Front Row for a couple small projects, and that kind of ballooned out there. Got to know some of the sponsors really well, and NASCAR is a sport of connections. It's who you know, and those connections have just blossomed since then.
For sure, that's very awesome. You mentioned your first team that you worked with was a small team in Ohio. Do you remember what team it was and what driver?
Yeah, it was a small team. It was at the time based out of South Carolina. It was called Faith Motorsports. So they're no longer in the sport. They ended up selling off to I believe Martin's truck team at the time. But yeah, they teamed up with for a couple lease trucks with a couple of the small teams out there. But yeah, they're no longer in the sport. But it was a good experience, and like I said, it got me into the sport and then got the connections going.
For sure. And during your childhood, like what ultimately like led to your interest in graphic design? Was that your first thought in your childhood, or did you have other thoughts before?
Yeah, I was always an artistic kid, drawing every chance I could. So that kind of direction I've always had in my life, where I wanted to do something in the design field. Just wasn't quite sure what that was until I was in a drafting class in my VOTech when I was in high school, and I really enjoyed that. I love the technical drawing aspect, but wasn't so much keen on the math part. So I always had that kind of engineer mind, but I didn't. I also had that creative side, and it was just kind of struggling on which direction I wanted to go. My dad's trying to push me towards the more profitable side in engineering, but I went with the let's be poor side, and at least enjoy what you're working on side in the artistic. So yeah, I was introduced to a graphic design course through the VOTech, and that really piqued my interest and kind of found an area of design that I really felt most comfortable doing, and that just kind of led to my decision to go to school for graphic design. Still not knowing exactly the direction I wanted to go in the field. There's so many different avenues, but that was a good starting point for me.
For sure. And did you have any other thoughts of doing something else other than graphic design beforehand of getting into graphic design?
I pretty much knew when I was in the ninth grade what I wanted to do, so that was pretty young. Before that, I want to be a farmer. Like like any child growing up in the country, you kind of have that dream of being a farmer. But as I grew older, I realized that my skills were better in the graphic design field.
Absolutely. So, did your parents have any background in graphic design, or are you the first one?
Oh, that's a great question. My both my parents are pretty artistic. They can draw fairly well. and have that creative, mindset. So I think that that was just kind of instilled in, my sisters and I. We all kind of have that artistic drive in different ways. So I'm the first one that's actually in the graphic design field, to make a profession out of it. So I guess I could be the first one out of my family there.
Awesome. So you mentioned you went to school for graphic design. What school did you go to?
I went to the Pennsylvania College of Technology. It's a small affiliate of Penn State, out in Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
Awesome. And then have you done any other things in graphic design?
Yeah, I currently work as a creative director at a marketing firm here in Ohio. At that firm, I manage creative teams for primarily packaging design and retail. So a lot of the stuff that you see in Lowe's and Home Depot, Menards, there's a lot of products that we've touched and designed the packaging and marketing around each of those. Some of those overlap the racing world as well. Back it was a few years ago with Paul Menard. One of our clients was a big sponsor of theirs. Mainly associate sponsor there on the TV panel for Paul Menard's Daytona cars. So that kind of it's cool to see those kind of worlds overlapping.
For sure, that's very cool. And so when you're doing the process of designing cars and such, do any of the drivers or members have any say to what they prefer the paint scheme to look like, or are you coming up with pretty much all the ideas?
Yeah, it really depends on the client. So there are some drivers that are more in tune with or have greater opinions on what they want to see. I know Corey LaJoy is very involved with all aspects of his race team, which is cool because he's very passionate about what he does. So he's got a very specific vision that I try my best to try to make that vision happen for him. And then you have other drivers where they'll give you full reign. They'll say, "Here's a sponsor. I just need something to show them," and generally they're good with whatever you come up with. So there's a wide range of different opinions when it comes to the review of the design.
Awesome. And then for the trophies, or both cars and trophies, are you the only one designing during that process, or do you have other people like next to you during the process of designing the cars?
So when I designed the design of the car is all it's on my plate. So I'm the one designing the cars and doing the prep work and sending it over. I will collaborate with some of the designers from the specific teams, like Kevin Wilson from Spire. I'll send the layouts over to him, and then he'll make any adjustments to some of the associate sponsors across the board, and then kick that back to me and say, "Hey, Shawn, we added an edit to the associate sponsors. This is how they're going to be arranged for this year." So, there is some collaboration with some internal designers from that aspect, but mainly the base design is something that's completely on my plate.
Awesome. And then for designing, you do both cars and or paint schemes and trophies. Which one would you say takes more time?
I would say the trophy, and it's probably because I don't design a lot of trophies. So, I want to make sure that, the few that I do are going to be there. But trophies are a different animal because you're designing not only the appearance of how it looks, but the structure as well. So, there's so many different ways you can go depending on the sponsor of the race, and what they want to see, and then getting their feedback and direction, and trying to incorporate that into a three-dimensional piece is a little bit different. You still have the same challenges that you were if you're designing a car, considering the 5-point and all the different sides. But I would say a trophy is a little more complex than designing a car.
For sure. So the next gen car came out last year, the new car for Cup, and the car numbers moved slightly further up, closer to the front tire, compared to past cars. So did the new placement of the number change your approach in how to design a car at all?
Yeah, I think the entire design world within NASCAR was kind of thrown off with the change and sliding numbers up, or before that they're experimenting with sliding them back, or all over the place until they landed on moving them forward. But I think pretty much all designers were against it. I don't like change, and that was a huge change. I'm kind of a old school number on the doors guy, and I think deep down in my core I still am, but there have been some paint schemes where moving the door number forward has allowed me to really push the envelope with getting the brand and getting the sponsor as big as possible. There are some sponsors that just it doesn't work. If you have a very square looking logo that only fits right next to the door panel and it leaves the corner panel all bare, or you have to put something else on there, it can get kind of wonky. But for the most part, we're able to really maximize the brand of the sponsors, and I think overall they're happy because you can see that brand from further up in the stands when you get that number move forward and the brand really large.
Absolutely. So, have you ever had a car design you made before where one side of the car is differently styled as the other side? And then if so, which cars and drivers can you think of and what year?
Oh, that's a good question. I know that NASCAR kind of limits the having a non-symmetrical paint scheme. I know that Dale Jr. kind of got pinged for that a couple years back at Michigan when I think he ran a Superman theme that it wasn't the same on either side, and NASCAR didn't approve it. So generally, I try to keep all the paint schemes, the same on both sides. There are some that will change positioning wise. For example, one of Corey LaJoie's Built Bar cars, we had a giant eagle, on the car. Originally, we had it on the side panels, and the sides looked a little different. But for the most part, I try to keep both sides the same when it comes to the design.
Awesome. So, and then speaking of like design of the cars, I know sometimes people like to change like the color of the numbers, like or most of the time it's the most common is the roof number being a different color than the side numbers. Have you ever done a design like that?
Yeah, and the roof numbers are mainly for spotters. So if the team has a spotter who is very vocal about what he likes or what he's used to when he's spotting, they'll have specific feedback and say, "Hey, do whatever you want to the design, but keep the roof number this color." Because that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm used to. Or I know there's other cars in the field that have this similar look, and we don't want to get mixed up with them. So every once in a while, they'll come back and give some feedback on the change on the color for that specific reason.
Awesome. And then have you designed cars before where it looks similar to the main colors of a holiday season, like Memorial Day or Halloween, for example?
Yeah, we do a couple themed cars. One that we recently did for Rich Mar Florist with Stephen Parsons was last year for, I believe it was Martinsville. We did a skull, kind of a skull pattern that kind of mimic kind of what Rich Mar had. We did for Rich Mar earlier in the year, where they had that floral pattern kind of ghost in the background. We just kind of changed that to that same color, but it was all skulls. And obviously, when you're working with BJ's group, he's all about skulls. If you've ever met him, it's he's got skull everything. So, and skull racing is kind of his tagline. So it all fit together perfectly. And the look of the car was really aggressive. It wasn't scary to the point where little kids would go running, but it really had a cool look. I thought in the end it turned out really well.
Yeah, it's really cool adding a unique uh like add to the paint scheme. So also during NASCAR enjoys having a throwback weekend each year at Darlington. So would you say that's the most fun car to design throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, all designers love the throwback weekend at Darlington, and it's fun to try to find that connection, whether it's a driver connection to a specific throwback, or trying to work within the areas that NASCAR designates, for the throwback weekend. It's always a challenge to try to get the brands to fit what the look of the original car. And from a designer standpoint, and I know there's lawyers everywhere are probably on edge that weekend because of all the brand violations that are happening. And I think that they kind of turn their heads the other way that weekend and just kind of know that this is honoring the original paint scheme and not necessarily a ploy to try to gain some sort of leverage by associating your brand with the established brand. And but from a legal standpoint, I bet they're on edge. But from a designer standpoint, it's fun. You try to push the envelope and try to get as close as possible to the original brand. By modifying the current brand of the sponsor with the paint scheme you're trying to do.
Awesome. And then staying with the theme of throwback, what would you say is your favorite throwback scheme you've made?
I've done a couple. I've done a few. Last year we had a pair of throwbacks for freight auctions and front row that were cool. That throwback to the original Bill Elliott paint schemes, and the sponsor has a great relationship with Bill Elliott. Off track, so that connection really made sense. I think still one of my favorites is the Crunch throwback that we did with Corey LaJoy. The throwing back to the 32. Corey is very specific about his throwbacks. He likes the numbers to match. So if he's driving 32, he wants to have a 32 original. So that's one of his very specific, feedbacks when it comes to throwbacks. But the Crunch car with Keen parts and Corvette parts really turned out well. It's when you kind of squint at it, you can do the squint test. It's hard to really tell that's either a Crunch car or it's the Keen parts car. So turned out really well. They were able to secure white rims for it as well, and that kind of was a nice touch. It was close to the silver as we can get, but it really tied everything together.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so what would you say is your favorite paint scheme out of every, like not just throwback, but like any paint scheme you ever made?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's like asking what your favorite child is, who your favorite child is. But you know, I, I I really like the paint schemes and how it turned out for this year's freight auctions cars, where they've embraced the white front and then kind of transitioned to the more of the darker black rear section. And the way that we've kind of adapted the design throughout the years, changed them a little bit, but they all have that consistent look. But this year's layout, I think, with the aggressive angles in the Cup car and McDowell's 34, I think was a nice. I really liked how that turned out, and it's slowly becoming one of my favorite paint schemes. Another one that I really liked was the Alex Bowman's nationwide paint scheme from the Roval from back in 2018. He was slated to win that race, and he really should have. He had a few errors that kind of threw him off, and it's kind of a bummer. He finished second, but that was a cool paint scheme, very high profile. So that was nice to see.
That's really cool. So you mentioned Alex Bowman. So how many different drivers do you think throughout your time now you've designed cars for if you lost track?
Oh man, I mean, I tried to figure that out one time and I kind of lost count. I don't do work for just one specific driver or team. I do keep everything confidential between the drivers, so there's no risk of releasing it to someone else or the confidentiality issue there. But I would say at least 15 to 20 different drivers directly that I've worked with and have done paint schemes for.
Awesome. So what paint scheme throughout your time would you say was the most difficult to design? And do you remember what year and driver it was?
Well, just from a technical and design standpoint, going back to one of Corey's designs for Schluter, Schluter Systems has what's called a Ditra pattern, which is like the little squares that they have in their orange that kind of mimic a product that they have. It's called the Ditra pattern. It's a very specific pattern, and so there's a lot of focus on getting that exactly right, and then combined with their coloring and everything like that. So from a design standpoint, that file is very large, and I know Kevin Wilson from Spires probably hasn't crossed me off his top 10 I hate these people list just because of that. But it's a very big file, and I know it's crashed his computer a few times. So it's been kind of a difficult thing to work around from a designer standpoint. I mean, you would never notice on track, but on, behind the curtain. That one was a little bit of a challenge just because of, the size of the files, and when you make a change, it takes forever to for the computer to process and just load. So that's been a challenge from the backside, but we get it figured out, and you never tell on track.
For sure, yeah. It sounds like there's just a lot of pieces in the puzzle that you just have to slowly do, not rush, and for sure, just
Nope.
like art. Um, so what type of technology do you need for designing a car or cars or trophies?
I do all my design in Adobe Illustrator, so everything is vector based. From the cars to the trophies to everything, it's designed in a way that you can expand it up or down without losing print quality. And a lot of times that's just the industry standard for the print houses or wrap companies. They can accept images or raster items, but they prefer vector, just so that in the event they'll scale up and down to fit their template specifically, and that'll allow them to have no loss in quality.
For sure. So recently, I forget like what year it started, but the cars changed from just being painted to being wrapped now. Does that change your approach at all to designing, or is it still the same?
Well, all the cars that I've worked on have pretty much been all wraps. With the exception of Hendrick, I think that they do painted bases and then apply decals to them. But for the most part, it's all completely wrapped. I think that's pretty much how most cars are on track, especially with the changing of the sponsors from each race. Where in the old days, you would paint a fleet of cars a base color and then maybe swap out a decal here and there. But anymore, these big teams they're rewrapping for every single race, new sponsors, new look. It doesn't really change from a design standpoint how I approach it. Those details will get broken down once the paint scheme's approved, and then it goes into either to the wrap company or in-house to the team to figure out the approach. Like, does it need to have a base color? What color, what Pantone does that need to be printed or painted? From there. But from a design standpoint, the process remains the same.
Awesome. So as a child, what would you say before you got into designing cars? What would you say was your favorite car design you saw on TV as a kid?
As a kid, I remember, I love the Mellow Yellow car, the Kyle Petty's Mellow Yellow scheme. I think partly due to Days of Thunder, but I remember as a kid, getting cardboard boxes and kind of painting them up like the Mellow Yellow car, and doing paint schemes really, from the age of like 10 or whatever, maybe 9, or however old I was at the time. But yeah, Mellow Yellow car I always loved. I'm not sure if I just like the Mellow Yellow drink or for whatever reason I was gravitated towards that.
Yeah, the Mellow Yellow car is definitely a classic. I know Kyle Larson did a throwback one year for that.
Yep.
So, what location in the country do you primarily work? Because I know in the Charlotte area, the majority of the NASCAR teams are based there. Or so are you like still in Charlotte with them, or are you located somewhere else?
Yeah. Well, I'm currently located in Canton, Ohio. So the Pro Football Hall of Fame is basically in my backyard here. So I've lived here for let's say maybe 10, 11 years. We did live in North Carolina previously. We lived outside of Greensboro, and that's I lived there for probably about 8 years. But didn't really, once I started getting into NASCAR and doing a lot of consistent work, it wasn't until after we left the Carolinas that I started getting involved with that. So it seems kind of backwards from a logistical standpoint.
For sure. And was Ohio also your childhood home or a different home?
I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, so we live in Northeast Ohio, so it's like right across the border. So we're only about 2 hours from where I grew up in Pennsylvania. So and that was really the reason for the move. My wife and I started having having children, and we decided that we were all by ourselves in the Carolinas, and we wanted to move back closer to family. So Ohio was as close as we can get to a reasonable drive, and her parents now live out here in Canton as well. So we're just closer to family, and are able to provide that kind of relationship for our kids too. So that was important.
For sure, yeah, family's definitely number one for anyone, so that's definitely awesome. So, what's the deadline usually to get in a paint scheme or trophy by?
The trophies have a pretty long lead time. We deal with a group that they've designed many of the different track trophies. One for Talladega we did in 2018. That one, it has probably about 6 week lead time on. So there's quite a process once the design's approved to go in, and actually the fabrication of it took a little time. So the trophies take a lot longer than the wraps do. The wraps can essentially be printed and allow for the print to dry and be wrapped almost within a couple days. So I know that they don't like to do it that way just because it's pretty close, and they're cutting it close with the car leaving in the hauler to go to whatever race they're trying to hit. But the lead times are pretty quick. Typically, sometimes I'll get a request, overnight, say, hey, the truck's leaving on Wednesday, and it's Monday. So I need to, like kind of rearrange my schedule and try to accommodate that the best I can. Once the design's approved, then, it goes to the wrap house or the wrap company to produce it.
Awesome. So, like, for going back to trophies, so how how do you remember like how many races you've designed trophies for now throughout your time?
The trophy design aspect, I have one sitting behind me right here. That's the very first one I ever did. It was for the pole trophy, or the pole winner. Kevin Harvick won the pole at Talladega. That was the first one. I believe 2018 is when it was. Since then, the only trophies I really design are for Freight Auctions, which is a client that I have a good relationship with and do a lot of work for. So they are sponsored. Since Talladega, they sponsor the truck race in Atlanta. So I've designed all of the truck race trophies. I believe Kyle Busch won the first trophy in 2021. Corey Heim, and then Christian Eckes, won the last one in Atlanta recently. So, those Freight Auctions trophies are really special. I mean, that's, the one behind me, Freight Auctions actually had 3 of them made. One for the winner, one for in the Freight Auctions office, and then one they gave to me. So that was really cool. It's a really special piece that, it's pretty unique to have a replica of the actual logo or the actual trophy for the race, and to be won by someone like Kevin Harvick is pretty cool too. It'll forever be in my trophy case, literally. So it's a cool piece to have, and I'm grateful for Freight Auctions for providing that for me.
Yeah, that's really cool. Harvick's definitely a legend in the sport, so for sure. So you mentioned the Atlanta race that happened a couple weeks ago. I saw SMD Racing tweeted about it, and they said that they thought it'd be a cool idea if Lionel Racing or Circle B diecast started offering race trophy replicas along with the race winning diecast. So I thought that was a very cool idea too. So you think there's any way that that you guys can gain traction to be able to make that happen in the future, or?
Yeah, that's a tweet selfishly I just put out to kind of spawn conversations. A lot of times that's how these things happen, just from fan interactions, or a lot of ideas that fans end up posting. But they have many replica helmets out and all these different things, and race trophies would be something really cool that if they could start producing that. I might have a little bit more investment in them than the average person, but I think that from a fan's perspective, it would be cool because a lot of times people love to have the trophy and put it's a good photo op. So they'll have the trophy and they kind of act like they won the race, kind of like a gold medal. But it's something that I wanted to throw out there. If Lionel and Circle B have any desire to do that, that would be awesome. I would love to see that. I think it would be a good avenue to explore to try to expand their offering.
For sure. Yeah, I thought that was a really like great like out thinking outside the box like idea. So that I feel like that was like that's a really good idea. So how long does it usually take to perfect a design? I know sometimes you can just do it quickly, but it's not like perfect. Like how long does it take to like have it like absolutely like the best?
Yeah, it ranges. It just depends. Design's one of those funny things where it could take you 45 minutes, it could take you 9 hours. It just there's a lot of different factors. Like I said, with the sponsors, sometimes sponsor logos, you get a really cool logo that has a lot of unique elements that you can introduce into the actual design itself. And then the design just flows really easily, and you come up with a great paint scheme or a couple different options that you really feel good about, and you're like, wow, that came really easily. And then there's some other ones where it's just like you're struggling. It might be 2 o'clock in the morning and you're like, I just want to get to bed because I'm tired and I got to get up in like 3 hours. And design is really struggling at that point, as most designers can attest to. That's probably something they struggle with too. But it depends really. Like I said, 45 minutes to 9 hours. I mean, the range is pretty wide.
For sure. And I mentioned earlier about the next gen car. There changes earlier with the number, but they also changed where you're allowed to have a chrome numbers on the car now. So have you designed cars before uh that have chrome numbers?
Yeah, we've been trying to do chrome numbers on a few cars um that have been a challenge, because NASCAR is still pretty specific on the chrome and how it looks, and how much contrast there is between the number and the original base paint scheme. So they won't allow you, if you have like a white base, to put a chrome number on it, just because there's not enough contrast. So there are some limitations that go into that. I know that we tried on a few MBM cars. I think 2 years ago or last year, when we were trying for the Daytona 500, in Timmy Hill's bumper car. That we that originally rolled out with just a white number, and then we put chrome on it, and then there's some contrast issues there, just trying to make that stand off. But I know that NASCAR is allowing that more and more. I mean, it's only on the door number. A lot of people think that you can do all the numbers in Chrome, and they only allow the door numbers for the Chrome portion.
Awesome. Do you like the new addition to the chrome numbers?
I think that yes. I mean, the answer would be yes, because I like how they look once they're rolled out on track and everything's fine. But from a designer standpoint, Chrome's highly reflective, and it's one of those elements where it's kind of unknown until it's printed and it kind of rolls out of the garage and you see it. Once you see it and it's good, then it's fine. But if they roll out and then you can't see the number, and it reflects a bunch of different things, and it could change how that looks. And so the unknown portion of the chrome and just how it's going to look when it's on the car itself is kind of unnerving a little bit from a designer standpoint. But when it's done well, and it's out there, it looks really nice.
For sure. So do you travel to the majority of the races throughout the season with the teams you designed the cars for?
Oh, that's another great question. I generally try to make it down to the Atlanta race, just because I have, Freight Auctions is one of my big clients, and they have a lot of stuff going on. That's their home base, their home track. So I try to get down there for that race. I have a couple other. This past year, I had a paint scheme with Hill Motorsports as well in the truck series. So I try to make it down for those races, but generally I don't do a lot of traveling. I've been to Talladega a few times. Again, it really just depends on Freight Auctions involvement. Being one of my bigger clients, If they have a huge involvement in the race specifically, then I'll try to go down and spend some time with them. And, it's good to see them and catch up with them as well on a personal side. But this past year, last season, I only made it to Atlanta. This year, I wasn't able to make it down to Atlanta. So I'm not sure if I'll be attending any races this year, just due to my schedule. It's a little hectic.
For sure. And all the cars you've designed over the years and such, how many times has that car that you designed made it to victory lane and won the race?
So that's been kind of a point of contention with my design conscience here. Like that's the ultimate designer goal, is to design a paint scheme and get it in the victory lane. Oddly enough, the only paint scheme that's made in the victory lane was one of Brett Moffitt's early freight auctions trucks, where it was a last minute deal. It literally, I got a call from freight auction from the owner saying, "Hey, we're sponsoring Brett last minute at Chicago, and we need to come up with something to get on the truck. It's leaving, I think 24 hours." I'm like, wow, that's pretty quick. So we only had time to just put decals on the car, and it was right at the time where we were working on the new freight brand, and we weren't exactly ready to roll it out just yet. And so I told Marcus, the owner, I was like, well, let's wait, being this is a last minute rush deal, let's just push the old freight brand out, and we'll make an effort to really roll out an intentional rollout for the new brand. And so Brett went to Chicago and won the race. So now I was kicking myself that we didn't put the new freight brand on that truck that went into victory lane. And so I was kind of regretting that. And it was just a black truck. There was really hardly any design to it. It's just, sponsor placement and logo arrangements and whatnot. So I was kind of kicking myself after that, looking back in hindsight, we should have put the new brand on it to capture that new brand on the truck race that they won. So since then, I've designed probably over 175 paint schemes that have not made it to victory lane. I'm waiting for that one. We've come close a lot of times. Brett came close to winning a few Xfinity races, in a freight auctions paint scheme. I know that the Alex Bowman car I talked about earlier, he placed second at the Roval. So that we came really close in a lot of cases. Timmy Hill almost won Daytona, in an MBM car. So there were a lot of close second place finishes, but I'm still waiting on that first place.
Yeah, that Brett Moffitt story you talked about at the truck race at Chicagoland, where it was like the last minute. Is that like the least amount of time you ever had before designing a car?
Yeah, that one was probably the most constricting, just because we wanted to do a paint scheme base for it. But there were no time. Like the wrap company said decals only, it's going as a black truck. So we just had to arrange the layout and get it approved by NASCAR, and that was really all we had time to do. By the time NASCAR approved it, was already in the truck, so they would have to make any changes at the track if there were any. So that was probably the most rushed, and I think it was just magnified by the fact that he won that race, that it was just kind of this whirlwind. Because freight auctions, they weren't actually going to that race until they were sponsoring the Brett, so they kind of threw travel plans together at the last minute. And I'm glad they made the trip, because they ended up going to victory lane with that.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely quite the story. So to tell, like, even years from now. So that's really cool. So what did it ultimately mean to you? I saw that your SMD Racing won the 2019 NASCAR on NBC Paint Scheme of the Year award for the Corey LaJoie Scooby-Doo Mystery Machine car in the Cup Series. So what did that mean to you to get that honor that year?
Yeah, that was a really cool honor, because that was based on the actual design of the car. Where as a designer, I want to have my cars in victory lane, but getting it in victory lane isn't up to me. It doesn't have anything to do with the paint scheme. That's up to the team and driver, and there's all kinds of factors there. But to win the paint scheme of the year, was that award was given on merits of design and popularity. You know, obviously using Scooby-Doo, who is a very iconic, you know, cartoon, and you know, there's a huge fan base out there for Scooby-Doo. I mean, who doesn't like Scooby-Doo? I mean, it's a lovable character. People can relate. We tried our best to get as close to the Mystery Machine as we could over on the look and feel side. Worked with Warner Brothers to get the brand, get the permits and the licensing for it as well. And you know, it's become it's probably the most valuable die cast that I've designed. Because if you go out and try to buy it off eBay, you're looking at like $300 for the Scooby-Doo 124 size. So it's definitely become a collector's item and is becoming harder to find out there. But it was a really cool honor. I was really blessed to have that you know, being voted you know, the #1 paint scheme that year. So that meant a lot to me as a designer.
For sure, yeah, and that's very crazy that now it's going for that much online and stuff. Because 2019 isn't that long ago, like only like a few years ago. So that's crazy how it's already, because usually like the NASCAR diecasts are the like maybe like 15 or 20 years from ago are probably a lot more expensive, but the from last year is even more. So that's even more crazy
Yeah.
for sure. So was it whose idea was it to make a Scooby-Doo car? Was it Corey or was it you or was it, do you remember?
Um. Wow. Testing my memory on this one. Well, that was back when Corey was with Go Fast Racing and Keen Parts. You know, they produce a lot of you know, really unique looking paint schemes when it comes to the special themes. I think that they were having a brainstorming session. I believe it was Corey's idea to do a mystery machine because we were going that route with thinking of iconic cars, paint schemes that people would recognize, and I think the mystery machine was brought up at one point. So I think that Corey, you know, was saying it would be cool if we can paint it up looking like the mystery machine. That kind of spiraled from there, and we just kind of created some layouts and ended up, you know, working with Warner Brothers to try to get that deal through. And you know, it became a fan favorite on track. Again, who hates Scooby-Doo, you know? So it's you know, it's an oddly 70s, you know, looking car in the end, so it's definitely different than the other cars that were out there.
For sure, yeah. If my memory is good enough, I think was that like during the Halloween season too that you guys ran that scheme?
Yeah, it would have been for Martinsville you know, race, so it would have been around the Halloween time. So they didn't want to do anything super scary, and you know, they wanted to kind of fit in that iconic, you know, kind of a look and feel, something that you know, and you know, Keen Parts, they do a great job with associating themselves with those brands, and you know, things that people love, you know, like Peanuts characters and stuff like that. So you know, it was definitely, it definitely was great for their brand. A lot of positive association from being associated with Scooby-Doo.
For sure. So as a kid growing up, did you have a favorite driver growing up?
Like, you know, I was always a Kyle Petty fan, I think because of the Mellow Yellow deal. Um, Ironically enough, I love Jeff Gordon in the Rainbow Warrior car. I think just despite my dad, who was a big Earnhardt Senior fan, you know, I think that was more of the play. You know, he was a senior guy, and I was, you know, the opposite with the DuPont car. So, but you know, I would say Kyle Petty. I was a big Kyle Petty fan growing up, and I think more so of, you know, I'm a love for my love of design and how the cars look. I think is you know, how I became fans of different drivers in that aspect.
For sure. And do you remember what race was your first, like what track and race was your first ever race at?
Yeah, I actually, you know, my dad was a NASCAR fan growing up. I actually was not really a NASCAR fan. In fact, I didn't like NASCAR because my dad would always watch the race, but he'd always be sleeping. And so I'd always want to watch something else because we grew up in a house with just one 19-inch television, and I wanted to play, you know, Nintendo or what or do something other than watch the race. And he was sleeping, so I'd change the station, and he would wake up and tell me exactly what was going on. So, you know, I don't know how he did it to this day. I mean, he was sleeping. I heard him snoring, but he was still soaking in the information from the race. But that's another story for another day, I guess. But so I grew up not really liking NASCAR just because it was always on at my grandparents' house and it was always going on in the background. And it wasn't until I started really appreciating the design. From a designer standpoint, there's no other sport that supports designers in graphic design like NASCAR does. So that's when I started really becoming interested in it. And it wasn't until I was, out of school and, as an adult and actually living in the Carolinas is where I really, developed that love for NASCAR. Because, down living outside of Greensboro, everyone is watching, they're watching the race nonstop. And it's race city down there. So it's, up north, it's not as big in some areas. So that's where I really developed the love for the sport. But to go back to your question, I kind of got off topic there, but Martinsville was actually my very first race. I believe it was like 2005 or 2006. I think it was. I ended up going to Martinsville with a friend of mine who was a NASCAR fan. And, I was rooting for Jimmy Johnson at the time. I was a Jimmy Johnson fan, for that race. And I remember Denny Hamlin won that race. But it was, that was the first time I really, I went to the race with no headsets, no ear protection, no nothing, and realized that you need a headset and you need ear protection when you go to races. So that was a good learning experience because my ears were ringing for weeks after that. So, definitely learned a lot from that first race.
For sure. And what would you say is your favorite NASCAR track on the schedule right now, out of all three series, or like choosing out of all three series?
Oh man, that's a great question too. Talladega has always been a great, a track that I really liked. I've been to it a few times. I've actually started a truck race there. I was the honorary race starter for one of the truck races, so I got to stay up in the stand and wave the green flag as they started the race. So that was really cool. So I have this special love for Talladega. It's an iconic track. A lot of my family ends up there. I have a lot of family in the South. They end up going camping at Talladega. So it just is overall is a great experience, and I have a lot of good memories from that track.
For sure. Yeah, that's really cool with the waving the green flag. Not everyone gets to do that, so
Yeah.
that's a really cool experience. So throughout the years, who would you say throughout the time been your biggest inspiration?
Oh man. There's been a lot of great designers out there. In the outside of NASCAR and just been an influence on my career and whatnot. But just it's hard to pinpoint one exact inspiration when it comes to that stuff. But it's I find inspiration from all areas of life. From my parents being artistic and kind of pushing me into the art field, but just other designers in the field as well. I'm part of a design group here with other designers, in the field that design work for teams and sponsors and individuals. So we all kind of just bounce ideas off each other and kind of support each other in the design field. So it's a tight knit community. We're all technically competitors in one way or another, but a lot like drivers, we work, every week, we're dealing with teams and working in the same field. So we have a friendship aspect as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's very cool. And throughout your childhood as well, did you play any sports during your childhood for your school?
Yeah, growing up, I played baseball pretty much my whole life. In fact, I'm coaching now my son's baseball team. So, that's a sport that I've always been involved with growing up. Played basketball for a little bit here and there. Wasn't very good. So baseball is definitely, something I was better at, but still I wasn't very good at baseball either. It's just kind of an average athlete. So, I'm hoping that, I can, help guide my sons into, a better baseball career than I had, but, we'll just see how they develop.
Yeah, that's very cool. What position did you play when you played baseball?
I played second base. And then I, started out, like most kids starting out in the outfield. So I was a left fielder, and then finished out my career, the last couple of years at second base on the infield.
Yeah, that's very cool. Is that a similar position your son plays now, or he's doing something else?
Well, he plays first base, so he just kind of scooted a base over, and that's for whatever reason he's really fast. He's a really fast kid, but so I thought that maybe he would be better suited in a one of the other bases where you're having to run around more, because first base is pretty stationary sometimes. But he's done well, and he really likes the first base position. So we'll just kind of go with what he feels most comfortable doing, and if he enjoys it, then I'm good with it.
Yeah, it's very cool. And does he watch the races with you as well?
Yeah, my kids, they think that I race the cars personally, and so does my grandma. She thinks that she's watching the races, she's looking for me specifically in the cars, which I'm not. So no matter how many times I tell her I'm not, I only design the cars, Grandma. I don't actually race in them. But my kids think, every race that I have my logo, my SMD logo on a car somewhere, which most of the case isn't the case. It's just that I've designed the cars. But I think that from a few years ago, I did have a few paint schemes in the truck series where my SMD brand was the primary sponsor. And that goes back to the truck team that I was telling you about earlier, where we just had some deals where we kind of bartered for sponsorship. So I do have I have up in my office a few framed photos of the SMD trucks, and so my kids all think that they're looking for NASCAR, watching NASCAR races, looking for that green SMD logo on the cars, and they can never find it. But it's just kind of funny what they latch on to.
Yeah, it's very cool. Um, so other than NASCAR, what's your favorite sport to watch and your favorite team of that sport?
Yeah, well, I mean, as of right now, I have a Steeler shirt on, so I'm a big Pittsburgh guy. So all Pittsburgh sports, something that I'm a fan of. Growing up in Western Pennsylvania, that was my team, as well as my wife's team. So um, Steelers, Penguins, Pirates. No matter how good or bad the Pirates are, we're still Pittsburgh Pirate fans. So that's that's our city for sure.
You mentioned three uh of the four major like ball sports, but the NBA doesn't have a Pittsburgh team. So do you follow the NBA and do you have a favorite team of that then?
Yeah, that's been kind of a weird thing, because as a Pittsburgh guy, you've grown up to dislike anything Cleveland. So, but with that said, I have been to a few Cavs games, and I like the Cavs. Just because Pittsburgh doesn't have a basketball team, I can say that, and it does feel weird having a shirt that has Cleveland written on it. Just from a Steelers fans aspect, it feels dirty, but we have been to a few Cavs games, and have enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's very cool. And have you been to any Cavs games with LeBron James playing before?
Yeah, we went to a few LeBron games when he was with Cleveland. So yeah, it was cool to see. And he's from Akron too. So I mean, it's Akron is only 20 minutes north of Canton. So it's definitely a cool local story.
Yeah, it's very cool. So uh I'm gonna end this with some fun questions now that I've developed. So the first one is have you ever been overseas before?
Yeah, I actually have. I've been to. I was just telling my kids about this last night. I've been to Jamaica. When I was growing up, we went down to Jamaica on a missions trip with our church, a building missions trip, and so we flew into Montego Bay and then drove to the interior of the island, and we're there for a week. So I've been there. My wife and I have been to the Caribbean, to Mexico. I've never been to Europe or any of the other areas over the oceans, but just kind of stuck to this hemisphere over here.
Yeah, it's very cool. And changing or keeping with the subject of countries, would you if where would you relocate if you were forced to leave the country?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Well, I think being Irish, and having Irish roots, we probably would go to Ireland, just because I think that we would be, you know, that we have the most heritage there and would feel more accepted there. That's it. It may be a place that my wife and I really, we want to go to eventually in our lifetime is visit Ireland. So why not move there if we have the opportunity to do that?
Yeah, for sure. That's very cool. And what would you say is on your bucket list?
Uh, well, I mean, designing a NASCAR paint scheme was on my bucket list at one point, so we've checked that off. But I think that I'd advance that to, design and a winning paint scheme in Victory Lane would be I mean, every designer's bucket list is that. That would definitely be something I want to do. I've also wanted to go see the pyramids, just on a personal note. I think that I've always been interested in the pyramids. That area is kind of volatile right now, but at some point I would like to see those.
Yeah, for sure. That's very cool. And who would you say is your all-time favorite Disney character?
Oh man, he's coming out with the hard questions here. Um, Disney character. Man, that's I'd have to say Donald Duck. I mean, he's just a quirky dude. I mean, no one understands him. He wears that weird little bib thing. But he's just funny and sarcastic. But I would say maybe Donald Duck would be a good choice.
Yeah, that's a very good choice. A classic throwback Disney character from the 40s or whatever when that was.
Mhm.
So definitely a good choice. And so do you have any nicknames?
Uh, well, I have if my wife, you ask my wife, she says that guys always have weird nicknames for other guys. So I have a lot of nicknames for other people, but it was funny because I was talking to my kids about nicknames. And one nickname I got was a snuggle bear. And my kids were kind of confused about why, and my wife was kind of worried about the reason why I was called snuggle bear, but um it's because we went down to when we lived in Carolinas, we went down to New Orleans right after Hurricane Katrina to help with some relief aid, trying to help some of the homes get renovated. And I was pulling insulation out of a house, and I was sweating because it's Louisiana, it's hot. And I pulled the insulation down, and it was wool insulation, and it just covered me because it had broken down over the years. And because I was sweaty, it just stuck to me. So I looked like a teddy bear. And one of my friends that was there, he's like, man, you look like the snuggle bear. And so from then on, they just kind of called me the snuggle bear for the weekend. It just kind of stuck. So nobody really calls me snuggle bear anymore, but at one point I was dubbed the snuggle bear.
Yeah, that's a very cool, funny nickname there. Uh, and then what is your all-time dream vacation?
Oh, I think as I get older, my dream vacation involves less and less things, just being left alone. So my dream vacation would be to probably just be able to like float out onto a nice pool with nobody in it, with a cold drink, and just kind of be left alone for a little bit. Any resort, it doesn't really matter where. I guess it would do for that. But I'm not picky when it comes to relaxing with a drink on a pool that has nobody in it.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds like the life there. And now bone-in or boneless wings? And then favorite flavor.
Oh, you got to go with the bone-in wings. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to that stuff. I like the hot wings, but I'm a dry rub guy. I really love a good dry rub wing. I do have a craving for the hot wings every once in a while, but I always default to either Cajun or there's a place called Jersey's up here. I don't know. It's a chain restaurant, but I don't know if it goes beyond Ohio, but they have an Erie Island dry rub, which is really good. And that's probably my favorite wing to get.
For sure. Yeah, I have to agree. Bone-in is definitely 100% better than boneless.
Hmm.
Because of everyone always says boneless with the they're just like chicken nuggets. So
Yeah, I mean, you would get that if you go to like a fast food place or to Zaxby's or something. You get that kind of, and I love Zaxby's. So I mean, but that's when you're talking about wings specifically, got to have the bone in.
for sure. And keeping with the food subject, favorite ice cream flavor?
I think back to what I get if when I'm going through the Dairy Queen drive-through. So it's always the Reese's peanut butter cup blizzard. I mean, that's what I get every time. So I'm just a sucker for it.
Yeah, definitely that's definitely a go-to there. And favorite music genre and favorite artist and song of that genre.
Well, I mean that's kind of something that's changed over time. I grew up in the country, listening in the country, and then listened to rock and some rap throughout the years, and have gradually, as I've gotten older, have kind of I've listened to country still throughout that time period, but that's pretty much what I exclusively listen to is country. Jason Aldean's one of my favorite artists, so if I'm gonna sit down and listen to anything, it's probably gonna be one of his songs.
For sure. Yeah, Jason Aldean's definitely a legend out there in the country world. And then staying with the theme of music, do you know how to play any instruments?
I don't. I am totally inept at doing anything musically. I don't play anything and I screw up the radio too. So I mean I can't read sheet music. My wife's very musically inclined, so she's a very good violinist and can play the piano and read sheet music. So she's kind of instilled in our kids that musical aspect. So they're all mini Mozarts and can do stuff on the piano, and they're always trying to get like, hey dad, why don't you show me this? I'm like, I can't show you anything because I can't do any of that. So yeah, I don't play any. I just listen. I'm a listener when it comes to that side. I don't play anything.
Yeah, for sure. So so wrapping this interview up now, everyone at Pit Pass Network enjoys to donate to a charity every time an interview occurs. So is there a charity you'd like to highlight for us today?
Yeah, one of the charities organizations locally here to us in Canton is Refuge of Hope. It's an organization that personally our church supports as well, and they come alongside people in the Canton area that need a meal or a place to stay, and kind of help them get off their feet, help them with job services, trying to get them employment, and just kind of improve their life, just by, showing some grace to them as well. So it's a great organization, that we've supported for a while. So, if I had to pinpoint one, that would be it.
Yeah, that's very awesome. Yeah, that's very great cause you guys are doing, and we would love to help you guys with that foundation for
Yeah, I
sure.
would appreciate that.
So so yeah, the wrapping up this interview, thanks so much, Shawn. It's a great honor to have you interview with us today. Thank you for giving us the time. And yeah, I hope wish you the best of luck with the rest of your path with graphic design. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for having me on. It's always good to get on and chat everything racing and beyond.
Yeah, very awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And have a good one.
You too.